Hey, it's Coach Hall here. Welcome to the Monday Motivation Meeting, and today is October 11th, 2021. I'm excited, folks. I'm super excited. I'm always excited on a Monday. I love to get my week started because I've got a purpose and a reason for living, and that's what really drives me. Every day is exciting for me, but I'm super excited about Mondays. I love my Sundays too. I loved yesterday. I took kind of a chill pill day, sat back, watched my favorite sports football team get clobbered. But it was okay because they put forth a great effort, and that's all I really want to see from my less than good team. They're going to get better over the years, I'm sure. At least the hopes are. So today is Monday. It's no longer Sunday. I enjoyed my Sunday. I hope you enjoyed your Sunday too. I had a nice relaxing afternoon after that. I jumped in the jacuzzi with my wife. Got the nice jets going on the back. Felt real good. We ordered some faux Vietnamese food. Had a nice, wonderful dinner. Got to sit outside on the patio. It's cool enough to do that now. So it was a wonderful evening. Hung out with the dog, played, finished binge watching a series that we're watching, this show called the Dome, I think, or Under the Dome. It's kind of interesting. Just again, something so I don't have to use my brain. It's because my brain needs a break. Okay, today I want to talk about the habit of you. We talked about BUCK last week, which is behavior, understanding, communication, and kindness, and that the buck stops here if you want to have a successful life. Well, the makeup of your life is this stuff that happens between the two big A and B points that we talk about: your birth, the big A point, and your death, the big B point, and this whole thing in the middle that we experience called life. In that life, we have lots of cycles that occur, a bunch of things that are happening, things that happen basically automatically. We got a ton of things that we do automatically. So the habit of you is what we want to focus on if we really want to create the best path possible between our ultimate A and our ultimate B. We want to have this thing called life be as masterful as possible, be as wonderful as possible. And the only way to really do that is to do some self-examining from time to time, to look at your behavior and look at these habits that are part of your behavior. So when we talked about bucking, or the buck stops here, we looked at behavior, but now we're going to dig deeper into it. And because behavior is a product of several things, and one of those things are habits. Okay? And so that's what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about your habits and what we can do about them. All right, we had some good news. We had an increase in the membership last week. We're up to 74. That's good news for the group. I'm super excited. Maybe you see a little more energy out of me this week because I'm getting ready to take a real vacation, folks. Well-deserved vacation. And so we're going to leave. And Sunday, I'll be back here, relaxed, ready to go, and we'll be doing the Monday motivational meeting in 2 weeks. So I don't think I'll be doing one next week. I could be. I've got Wi-Fi service on the cruise ship, but I think I'm going to be too busy in the spa, sitting back, relaxing, having some zen, being in zen for a week. So I may not even think about the time. I might not know what day of the week it is, folks. That's what I'm hoping will happen. Okay, so let's talk about the habit of you. Okay, the habit of you. According to research done by Harvard University, a habit takes about 67 days to form. Now, there's a lot to it, and the researchers wanted to really investigate this because there was this idea that it took about 21 days to form a habit. And it was based on some plastic surgeons' research of how long it took a person to get used to their new face, and it typically took about 3 weeks. And so the number kind of stuck. But Harvard said, well, I don't know. It doesn't really, let's look into it. So they did a lot of research. They studied and studied and studied, followed people, surveyed, and came up with a whole slew of answers to habits. The range is just from a few days to in some cases, if you're able to break a habit and start a new habit, up to close to 300 days. That's a lot of range there, from a few days to 300 days. Well, and it seemed like the average came out to around 66. So when somebody says to you, it's going to take you about 3 weeks to form a new habit or to break the old habit and start a new habit, and it doesn't, you might feel like there's something wrong with you. Well, there's nothing wrong with you. Now that we have more science and more research, we understand that the average is around 66 days. And there's a lot of caveats to this. One is the ease of keeping the habit versus the difficulty of learning and practicing a new habit. That's a huge factor. If it's just really easy to keep doing what you've been doing, let's say, for example, you have a habit of, sleeping in late. You just like to sleep in late. You should be waking up, say, at 7, but you're getting up at 10 every day. It's just real easy to sleep in, right? Maybe it's really difficult for you to learn to get up at 7 o'clock because you just don't feel rested. You'll do it, but you can't keep the practice up because you're just not getting the rest. Could be that you're not going to bed right, or maybe you're not getting enough sleep, or you're not eating properly. It could be a number of things that make up the learning part of why it is that you're not getting the kind of rest you need and you're not getting up when you need to get up. So there's a lot to learn, and then there's a lot to practice, which can form this new habit. Now, that for some of us, that might be very easy. You could start within 2 or 3 days, and suddenly, within a week, you have already started a habit of waking up at 7 a.m. every day. And you don't even need the alarm clock, okay? But for some of us, this is going to be very difficult because there's a whole lot of other things connected to why it is we do what we do. And one of those issues is related to willingness. And our willingness to do things is connected to our emotions, the way we feel, the way we think. There's a lot connected to why we are willing to do what it is that we do. And if our willingness factor isn't in a place conducive to change, but rather just to stay the same, the numbers are going to change. It's not going to be 21 days for you. It's going to be much longer. It might be closer to the 300-day period. But we need that consistency, okay? And if we stop the consistency, then we got to start over, and we got a new calendar to start on, okay? So the idea is that change can be done, but change typically has some level of difficulty. For some issues, not too difficult, but still not as easy as staying the same. And on the other end of the scale, it can be very difficult, very hard, very challenging. And oftentimes because there's a lot of emotional attachment, there's a lot of other things going on, or it could just be a multitude of mini habits that create this big habit that need to be looked at, and can we go in and start looking at all these tiny habits that need to be changed as well. So when we look at our habits, it boils down to the pain of change versus the pain of staying the same. Okay? Or the pleasure of change versus the pleasure of staying the same. And when the pain or the pleasure is greatest to one side versus the other, we're going to stay on the side that motivates us the most. And some of us are more motivated to change due to pain, and some of us are more motivated to change due to pleasure. So if you understand this about yourself, you will understand why it is that perhaps change of the habits are more difficult for you. Okay? And getting to this willingness factor, there's something about this, and this also came from the Harvard study, that they were able to determine that if somebody had a number of habits that they were trying to change at the same time, let's say you wanted to stop smoking cigarettes, and you want to stop eating unhealthy or just fast foods. Say you want to have a more healthy diet, or maybe you want to go to a vegan diet, but that's not what you're eating now. So you have a habit of eating sugary things and meat and all this kind of stuff, okay? You want to change some other things. Let's say when you get a few extra bucks, you like to gamble, and it hasn't worked out so well because sometimes you get yourself into hawk, right? You get yourself behind, like, all right, let me borrow some money, and now you're in trouble because you owe other people money for your gambling debts. Okay, so you want to change that about yourself too. Maybe you have some other things that you do and you say that annoy people, that keep you from establishing the kinds of relationships that you would like to have. So that's something else. So you got 3, 4, 5 things that you want to work on, and you decide one day, I'm going to completely change me. And this is going to become the new me. And I'm going to do A, B, C, D, E, F, G. I'm going to do all these changes. And it's happening today. Well, you might be able to do that for a day or 2 or maybe even 3. But at some point, the pain of having to make all these changes is just going to become too great. And it's going to impact your willingness. Harvard refers to this as willingness depletion. Like, you only have so much will to do the changes required. So if you got a lot of things to change and you just do a couple of changes, it's easier to make those changes to your habit. But if you've got a ton of habits out there and you're trying to change them all at once, failure is most likely going to be the result of your attempts. So we need to be mindful of our willingness factors and our depletion of willingness. We get low on it, we just don't have the strength to do it anymore, and guess what? We, go back to drinking, or we go back to smoking, or we go back to eating things we shouldn't be eating, or we go back to sleeping instead of exercising, or we go back to whatever the habit is that's keeping you from being the best version of you, is a direct result of your willingness to change. And if you're trying to change too much, you're going to deplete your willingness capabilities, and you're just going to end up creating a narrative which says, see, I can't do it. I just can't do it. It's just too hard. It's just too hard. So we need to consider what it is that is related to the habit itself. Is it one actual thing, or is it a multitude of things? I want to change all of me, and my habits are these 5 bad habits, or these 10 bad habits. Trying to change 10 bad habits is going to be extraordinarily difficult, and your experience is going to be failure. And then once you have a few failure experiences, and suddenly that narrative goes in your head, it says, I'm a failure, I can't change. So we want to be mindful of the fact that change is not an easy thing to do, and if we tackle it one by one, we can get where we want to go. It's one step at a time. We're not trying to leap across the world here. We get around the world one step at a time, okay? Another factor is this idea of short-term versus long-term rewards. Okay, sometimes what we do gives us an instant shot of dopamine or oxytocin or some chemical that occurs in the brain. It really makes us feel good. So we will do that versus delaying it for something that we haven't yet experienced and imagining what that's going to be like. That's very difficult for us. If you don't have the experience of understanding delayed gratification, then you don't have any experience to draw from that says, okay, let's try the delayed gratification. Your experience is just going to come from instant satisfaction. Okay, I'm happy. And this is the program or the habit you will create. So it's another type of a habit. If you get into a practice of practicing delayed gratification and you get to experience that, then you'll understand how powerful that is relative to those instant gratification moments or instant satisfaction moments. And you'll be able to make the sacrifices possible. But this is a process that you'll have to work on. And you have to look at what it is that habit's doing for you. Is it giving you a short-term fix? This is why something like cigarette smoking and drinking and alcohol is so difficult to change, because you get an instant off of it, right? You get instantly numb from drinking enough alcohol, right? You'll feel no pain, right? It's gone. Or you get that nicotine hit that makes you feel whatever nicotine does. I'm not a cigarette smoker, so I don't really know what nicotine does to the body. But you get something. I know people, they get nervous, they go smoke a cigarette. Pretty much after anything that's too exciting or they need to calm down, that nicotine seems to do it for them. So the long-term impacts of these things are not good. Alcoholism, cigarette smoke, cancer, there's all kinds of bad things that can come with cigarette smoke. So we don't want to be doing that. And we can't imagine what the long-term impacts are until it happens. I have a story for you. My dad, for example, he was at least a 1, maybe 2 pack smoker a day. In fact, he went through like a carton in a week. He would just smoke cigarettes. Sometimes as a little kid, I remember seeing ashtrays like in every room of the house, and there's a cigarette in it. So he was having one going all the time. And my mom was smoking too when I was very young. So there was a lot of smoke in the house. And my dad took a long time to stop smoking. In fact, after my parents split up, he had an apartment, I think up on the 9th floor, and he's always been in really good shape, and he wouldn't take the elevator. He would just always go up the steps. Well, one day he's going up the steps and boom, he collapsed. He just stood there trying to catch his breath. He said it seemed like forever, but probably was around 15, 20 minutes where he just couldn't breathe. He couldn't breathe. And he knew, I think he saw the doctors or whatever, but from that day forward, he never touched a cigarette. And before that, he tried the patches, he tried the gum, he went to the clinics and got the counseling and tried to wean himself off, tried the cigarettes that have less or bigger filters or whatever. All the tricks. I don't know them all, but he tried them all. I'm sure of it. And none of them would work until boom, he felt the impact of what was going to happen if he didn't stop. And that was enough. And sometimes that's what it takes. We need sort of this instant pain to take over that counters the instant satisfaction so that we can now work towards that delayed gratification. Replacing a rewarding for a less rewarding result is very difficult. And oftentimes that's what new habits are. We're asking ourselves to do with new habits. Healthier food, for example, oftentimes in the beginning, until you've acclimated to the taste, just doesn't taste as good, doesn't taste as yummy, isn't as satisfying as the less healthy food. So trying to replace something that isn't as rewarding can impact your willingness. Okay, so we when we look at our habits, we need to see what's the reward we're receiving from this habit. What are we getting from that? And then what are we going to be replacing it with? So one of the things that I know that's helped, and I've worked with drug addicts and stuff, that they would go for sort of this shot of exhilaration. The word that you get, what's the word I'm thinking of? It's when you get this high level of exuberance. It's adrenaline. That's the word. Adrenaline. They were adrenaline junkies, and so they would drink and do kind of crazy things or try very risky behavior type of activities because it would build up their adrenaline. So to stop doing these risky things, they went to exercise because you can get adrenaline from exercise. And so that was the shift that they made. So they were able to replace the reward for a very similar reward, just doing something that's more healthy. And sometimes that's what it takes. We're trying to figure out what reward we can give ourselves that will replace the reward that we're getting with the bad habit. Because there's some type of benefit that you're getting from your habit. It's short term, generally speaking, with long-term detriments associated with it. So we want to figure out what we can do to replace that habit with something that's equal in the rewards, if we can. Or we add something to it, add something to the mix. Give yourself an additional reward for having the courage and the strength and the willingness and the discipline to do the new thing versus continuously doing the old thing. Okay? Now, the best way to deal with all of this stuff, once you determine the habit of you and you got all your habits understood, is to work on one habit at a time. Okay, this is where you're going to establish some success. And so what I want you to do is I want you to just take some time, think about your habits. We all have habits. We get up at certain hours, we do certain routines, and some habits we won't need to change. Like, maybe the habit of when you do your laundry or when you feed your pet. And, those are good things, okay? But we want to write all those habits out too, all the habits that we have. And then we want to look at the ones that aren't so good for us, the ones that are problematic, that are maybe giving us a short-term reward, but we know over the long term, even the midterm, that this isn't going to be good for us. We need to make some changes. So I want you to write out all the habits that you wish to change, okay? Then I want you to rank those from the most difficult to the least difficult in terms of change. Which would be the most difficult for you to change and which would be the least difficult, okay? And put that one that's the most difficult at the top and the one that's the least difficult at the bottom, okay? Then I want you to rank them as most important to change. Now sometimes that most important one will be the most difficult as well, but sometimes it's not. And if we have a difference in there, what we can do is we can pick one of those that are less difficult but very important, if not the most important, to work on. Because what we want to do is be able to prove to ourselves that we can change our habits. And we're going to do that by using this strategy of finding something that's least difficult but higher up on the important list. Okay? So give yourself some kind of a challenge. And if it all lines up perfectly, that the most difficult is also the most important to change, and the least difficult is and the least important to change, start from the bottom and work your way up. We want to start establishing a positive mindset, and we want to start establishing a winning attitude. Okay? And we want you to stick with one habit change at a time. Because once you make that change happen, you're going to start to feel more confident about yourself and your ability to successfully change those poor habits and start creating healthier ones. Okay? So that's what we can do. Get motivated this week to find out who you are, what those motivating factors are about you, your habits, who you are habitually speaking, and then go in and make those changes. Make the easiest changes at first. And now if you feel really confident and you want to dive in for that big one, go for it. But understand that you've got this whole list here, and if it becomes impossible, or it's not really impossible, it just feels that way, by the way. But if it just gets overwhelming and too difficult, it might be that top thing that needs to be changed is actually made up of a bunch of minor changes. That's one thing to look at. But if you're just feeling kind of defeated, start with the least one. Something that's going to just take maybe 2 weeks to change, 3 weeks to change. It's not that difficult to change. And once you see it and you recognize it, okay, I can do this. And then you just keep going until you get through each and every one. You have the ability to change anything that you want to change. There's nothing that's impossible for you to change about you, because you got to where you're at. And you didn't know anything when you were born. You learned everything that you know now. You learned these behaviors, and all you have to do is replace them with new behaviors that you can learn. It's as simple as I can make it. Much harder to do than to say, for sure. But with a formula and a process, you can make it happen. And this is a very powerful and effective formula to do it. Just look at your habits, see which ones are most difficult, see which ones are most important, and start tackling them. If you're a little unsure about things, definitely start with the easiest ones and move up. If you feel pretty confident already, you already got a pretty strong mindset, go for the big one. I'm the kind of person that will look at things, I'm going to go for the big one, because once I get the big issue out of the way, everything else is a piece of cake. It's like, I just tackled the biggest issue here, and I get everything else done. Okay? So, whatever way you want to do it, you can go right into the middle if you want. It doesn't really matter. What's important is that you start doing something about it. That's the most important. That you look at your list and say, okay, we're doing this one. Okay? You could put it on a wheel and spin or roll dice or whatever. I don't care how you figure it out. But get going, make it happen, and start working on your habits so you can form the habits that you want that will be positive for you so that you can live long and prosper. Let's try these glasses today. Keep your mind open and cool and share the love.